Hello guys and welcome to this Q&A video. Today I'll be answering all the questions that you've asked earlier in the webinar and in the classroom. Moving on to the first question, which is asked by Sangamitra. So the question is, please explain about Zine Dates. Alright, let's try it with an example. As you can see on the screen, I've got these three cards: the learning card, mentorship card, and hiring card. Alright. So the learning card is on the top, below it is the mentorship card, and at the bottom we've got this hiring card. So this top bottom behavior, so which element comes on top of which, is decided by z-index. In other words, z-index is used to decide the elevation of your element from the plane of your screen. So if you see here, the topmost card has a z-index of 5. The second card, which is in the middle, has a z-index of 4, and this bottom card has a z-index of 2. Alright, now let's say we want to bring this hiring card on the top. So if you see here, what we can do is increase this z-index. So the moment it passes the z-index of your middle card, it comes above it. Similarly, let's say we wanted the learning card to be at the bottom. So coming to the learning card, so if you change the z-index to lesser than your second card, it goes below your second card. Similarly, let's say we wanted the second card to be on the top, we can give it the higher z-index. So let's increase that. And now as you can see, it's on the top. So that's the purpose of z-index. I hope that clears your doubt. If not, drop a comment and we'll discuss it again. Alright, so moving on. The next question is asked by Shruti, which says, hi, I know CSS position properties, but I want to learn when do we have to actually use it in a live project. Alright Shruti, just remember this one rule. Whenever you want some sort of overlay where one element is above another, think position absolute. That's it. Let's try an example. Say you wanted to make this a Google search box. Here we've got an input, and on top of it, we've got this mic icon. So overlay, think position absolute. Alright, so right now, we haven't used position absolute. Both have the default position values, which are static. So we've got the input box, and below it, we've got this icon. So let's try using this position property. Alright, so we've got this image icon here, and the ID is voice search icon. So let's give it a position absolute. So coming here, so position, say absolute, let's save it. And as you can see, now it's overlaying these buttons, but we don't want that. We want it to overlay our input box. So let's say top 0, let's save it. And as you can see, it went to the top of the screen. Because if you remember in the video when we talked about these position properties, position absolute is positioned relative to the parent which has position other than static. And if no parent has a position relative, then it just goes relative to the root element of the HTML. So that's why it's being relative to the web page that we have right now. But we don't want this. What we want is to be around this input box. So if you see your HTML code, this input box is wrapped by a div. All right, so let's try giving a color to this div. Let's give it a background color, say light blue. Let's save it. All right, so we've got this blue color wrapping our input box, but some of the content is going outside. So we could simply do box sizing border box. All right, so now as you can see, this division is wrapping our entire input box. And if we give this division a position relative, this image will come inside this box. So let's give that a try. So let's say position relative. And now as you can see, top 0 for this icon brings it to the top edge of our division, which is position relative. So now when I play around with these properties on the image, top, left, right, bottom, it will just move around this parent div. So let's give that a try. So let's say right 0, let's save it. And now as you can see, it's on the top right corner of this div. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to position it in the center of our input box. So what we can do is give it a top value, say 16 pixels. And as you can see, it moved down, but it still is not in the center of the screen. So let's increase the value, say 32 pixels. Similarly, we want it to be a little away from the right edge. So let's give it some value, say 32 pixels. And that's much better. So that's the purpose of using position absolute and position relative. So whenever you want to use position absolute, most of the times that's when you're going to use position relative. Because if you use position fixed, your element would be fixed and you wouldn't want that. So that's why you simply use position relative so that you set a frame of reference for your position absolute children. I hope that answers your query. If not, drop a comment and we'll take it up. All right, so moving on. The next question is by Nikita, which says, why we can't use background image for mic button? So everyone who's wondering what Nikita is talking about, so she's talking about this mic icon. Yes, Nikita, you can use background image for showing and aligning this mic icon, but as you mentioned in your question, this is a button and it needs to be clickable. So if it is in the background, then your user wouldn't be able to click it. All right, but if this was just for design, then yes, you could have used background image for this. I hope that answers your query. All right, so moving on to the next question. So we have a question from Aruna. She says, is it not possible to align anchor tag horizontally? For example, the nav element, and inside that she used anchor tags for Gmail, images, app icon, and profile image, but it didn't align properly. All right, Aruna. So answering your question, anchor tag is an inline element and it should work. So if you see my code, so if you see here, this Gmail, images, and my apps icon, even the image is inside the anchor tag. And if you see here, it's still aligned properly. So what you do is put your code in a code pen and share it with me. I'll see what the problem is. All right, that's for your answer. But you're trying to wrap all these things in anchor tag, which is not required. So this is not a link. So when you hover here, show your drop downs. Similarly, when you click here, it needs to show you drop downs. So these aren't meant to be links. All right, so moving on. So the next question is by Vineet Pal, which says, which property is best for animating, keyframe or transition, and why? Well, there's no best property. It actually depends on your use case. So if you have a simple use case, like you just want to scale this image on hover, you could use transition. But when you want to do something more complex, say when someone hovers, it scales down and then it scales up. So in that case, you cannot use transition. So let's give it a try. So this image has an ID, Google logo. Let's copy it, bring it up here. Let's bring up our code editor over here. All right, so let's try the first example where when someone hovers, it just scales out. So at the rate, Google logo, when someone hovers, transform and scale to say 1.2. All right, so as you can see, when I hover, it just scales, but there's no transition. So for that, we use this transition property. So Google logo and transition. So we're talking about the transform. So transform, and let's give it a duration of say 2 seconds. And now when I hover, in 2 seconds, it scales to 1.2 of the original size. So this was a very simple use case, and here you can use transition. But let's say when someone hovers, you want this Google logo to shrink or scale down and then scale up. So for that, we can use animation. So let's define a keyframe first. Let's say multi-scale. So at 0%, you want to transform and scale to, by default, like scale to 1, which is the original size. And then at 50%, say you want it to be half the size. Say 50%, transform, scale, so 0.5 and 0.5. And then at 100%, you want this to be 1.5 times the original. So transform, scale, 1.5 and 1.5. Let's save it. Let's remove this from here. And now what we want is, instead of this transform, we need the animation property. So first it needs the keyframe name, so which is multi scale. Then it needs a duration, let's say 2 seconds. Let's save it. And now when I hover, it scales down and then scales up. So as you can see, it's all about use case. So when you have a simple animation, you can go with transition property. But if you have something complex which cannot be taken care by transition, then you can use the animation property and keyframes. I hope that answers your doubt. If not, drop a comment and we will discuss it. All right, so moving on. The next question is by Shweta, and she wants to know the difference between app item space image and app item greater than sign image. So basically, she wants to understand the difference between child selector and descendant selector. All right, so let's say I have this section with an ID app item, and it has these images inside. So the first image is directly inside the section. The last image is directly inside the section, but the second image is wrapped in a div. So it is not a direct child of section. All right. So let's say we want to give these images a width of 300 pixels. So hash app item space images, space image, and width, say 300 pixels. Let's save it. Come in here, and as you can see, these images, they have a width of 300 pixels. So even if I increase it to 400 pixels, all get updated because I've used this space. But when I change it to greater than sign, now as you can see, only the first and last image is getting affected, not the second one. Because this greater than sign, it selects only the direct children of an element. So if you see your HTML code, first and third image is the direct child, but not the second one. And that's why second one did not get those styles. And that's the difference between a descendant selector and child selector, or difference between space and greater than sign selector in CSS. I hope that clears it out. If not, then please drop another comment and we will discuss it. All right, so moving on. The next question is by Jigger, and he asks, what is WordPress and do we need to learn it for web development? Well, WordPress is an online open source website creation tool written in PHP. It gives you access to certain themes that you can use to decide how your website will look and feel, but you don't need to learn it because you already know HTML and CSS, and you can write code to design your own websites. You don't need WordPress. All right, guys, moving on to the last question. So this question is by Tiffany, which says, how do you exercise patience as you learn? I feel like I'm going fast without going deep. Well, trust me, Tiffany, when I say I know how you feel. When I learn a new technology, it happens to me as well. I just want to get into the details of how things work behind the scene, how does different components work, etc., etc. But you just have to park that thought until you finish the breadth of the technology, and only then you should move to the depths. And it actually helps to understand the underlying details once you know the full breadth of that technology. So my advice to you, that's the right way to do it. You aren't doing it wrong. I hope that answers your question. If not, please drop a comment and we will discuss it. See you in the next video. Bye and take care.